Hey, Emanuele, how you doing?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I was dancing because, for two reasons. One, it's not easy to talk after Laila because Laila is one of the best speakers that I know. And the second one, because I love Blazor and in .NET 7, because I love to live on the edge. And .NET 7, there are a lot of new features about Blazor. But of course, we don't talk about it today because it's too early, also for me. Because, let's say, all the things can change in maybe 2 months, or who knows. So it's not safe to talk about, let's say, .NET 7 today, I think. I think we have to wait more or less 15 days, more or less. Or,
Yeah. So it's getting released around November. I will say there's release candidate on it, so I expect it to not change. I think it's ready to go if people want to bleed on the bleeding edge. Like that's an option for them.
Especially about minimal API, because me and two friends of mine, we wrote a book about minimal API for Pact, based on .NET 6. And they asked to us, hey, do you want to update the book to .NET 7? No, because we have to rewrite everything from scratch for .NET 7. So first release this version, and then let's see for .NET 8, but not for .NET 7. Let's see, because we have 1 year to rewrite everything for .NET 8. So let's see.
Yeah, I mean, writing books is hard, so I have all the respect for you. But yeah, if you're ready, I want to ask you about the stuff in the background, but I'm going to let you do your talk, and then we'll ask it at the end, because there's one thing back there. If I could get into your house and take, I would. But
Alien, I mean,
yeah, that's the one. But let's get to your talk, and I'm excited about this. I'm going to share your screen, and then Rachel and I will drop off. So good luck.
Thank you very much. So, hi to everyone. Today we are talking about Blazor and components in Blazor. I really like, let's say, to deliver this talk because in the past, and maybe also right now, I don't know, I am also a front-end developer. But I used to work with React or, let's say, framework like React, but mostly React because I'm developing a lot of Microsoft 365 application, and Microsoft decided to use React as the main, let's say, technology for front end. But when Blazor was released, maybe now I think 3 years ago, more or less, 4 years ago, I don't remember exactly. No, 4 years ago, if I remember exactly. I was really happy because I found a lot of, let's say, points in common with React and other frontend, especially the components. But what is the Blazor component? The Blazor component is a kind of, let's say, self-contained portion of UI that you can develop and reuse everywhere in the project. And you also can have a kind of its own logic because you can write code specifically for that component. And also can be nested because you can have a component with inside another component or the same component. Okay, so this is very, let's say, important to say. And you can also reuse the component. So if you have a 4-page in your application, you can use your component 4 times, for instance. And it can also be shared. I mean, for shared, I mean, you can share the component through a lot of projects and not only one project. So this is another good, let's say, lesson that I learned during my last maybe 2 years and a half of developing with Blazor, because I created a lot of components that I share through a lot of projects. So my productivity, of course, is better than before for this reason. This is one of the reasons why Blazor for productivity is perfect. There are a lot of, let's say, not a lot of, but let's say 2 or 3 advice when you start to develop the new component. One is the naming, and the other one is the routing. The naming it's really easy because it's a kind of, say, best practice, but the component name must start with an uppercase letter. I mean, if you are, let's say, used to, let's say, to work with React or stuff like that, all the components start, or at least it's a kind of another best practice, but not everyone follows this kind of best practice. All the components, all the stuff start with a lower, say, character. But with Blazor, it's better if you start, let's say, the naming of the component with an uppercase. And the path indicate the folder and the location and the file. I mean, if you develop a new component called project details, or at least pages/project details, the folder location is pages. Okay, this is also important to find really quick your components in the project. Spaces, of course, are not allowed in the name of the components because you can, let's say, you can have also a file called with spaces, but for routing point of view, it's not possible to have spaces. And you can, let's say, replace the space with a minus. Okay. But I am a developer. I don't want to talk anymore on this kind of stuff, and I would like to share my Visual Studio or JetBrains environment. JetBrains Rider. Let's see. I'm open. Sorry for waiting, but I forgot to open Rider before the session. I don't know why. So we start with a new solution from scratch. So I click on New Solution, and in the new screen, I can select Blazor Server or Blazor WASM is the same for this kind of example. We choose Blazor Server because it's one of the just selected. Okay, and then when the project is open, let's say, come on, PC, okay. And then from the solution, we can start to create, or at least we can start to see an existing component, because everything in Blazor is a component. I mean, in this case, this page, this file, not this page, is a page, and it's not. Sorry, my mouse is dead in this moment. So leave on the edge also. Sorry for that. I have to change my mouse. I hope everything it works. Sorry for this kind of. Okay, so I have a kind of recording studio here. So I have everything in double version: two mouse, two keyboards, to everything. So sorry. So everything in Blazor is a component as well. So in this case, let's say this page is also a component. So it means I can use this this counter as a page. Now I will start the project in a new browser. Let's see. Sorry, come on. Browser. Alexa, open the browser. Okay. So I can use this component as a page, like this page. Okay, counter, and the routing is counter, as you can see here at the top of the page. But I can take this, let's say, this page, and I can webinar. You're right, Khalid. And I can call my counter also here, and I can have also another counter in the home page. Okay, this is, let's say, all the magic behind the Blazor component. Okay, and let's see when the browser starts. Okay, and I have a counter in my main page and also in another page with a dedicated counter. Okay, and of course I can duplicate my counter, let's say 2 or 3 times, and I can also use another, let's say, syntax for this this component. Now I should have 4 counter in the home page, okay? And every counter has his own logic, okay? So this is the very basic of let's say how Blazor works with components, but it's more or less everything that you have to know to start developing a component, okay? But I can also add some parameter to this component. In this case, I want to add a parameter here, and I can use the syntax, the attribute parameter, and then I can use the public int step. Okay. In this case, Copilot helped me to write good code. Okay. Oh, I saw a questions in the chat, but I don't want to answer on that question. And then, sorry. And I forgot to add this parameter to the counter in the home page. Then I can go back here. I can remove all this kind of stuff here. And then if I press space, Rider suggests me that I have a parameter here, okay? And the name is step. This is important because it's very easy to have, let's say, this kind of intelligence, okay? And then I can add here a step by 2 and another one by 4, for instance. And then I can go to the counter, and instead of plus here, I can use plus equal step. Okay, thank you, Copilot, for helping me, because I'm not a good developer, but with Copilot, everyone can be a good developer. So I'll start my application again. And here I have the first counter with step 2, and it works good. Thank you so much, Copilot. And the second one by 4, and it works. Okay, this is the very introduction to Blazor components. But based on that, we can create more complicated, and not complicated, but more, components with a lot of logic behind, or a lot of logic, or at least his own logic behind. So we can leave, let's say, the project as is in this case, and we can start to develop a new component. In this case, I would like to create a new component with a kind of cards. As cards, you know, the address book that you have in your intranet or stuff like that, something like that. And then for let's say, and you can put your new components wherever you want in the project. Let's say I use everything, or more or less, not everything. I use every time this kind of folder structure, and I use a folder called resources here, components here in the root, and then I put every component inside of this this directory. But you can also have these components in the page folder as a subfolder of pages. It's up to you. Okay. In this case, I use this, let's say, just for this example, and I create a new Blazor component. Blazor component is the same component name, employee card. In this case, component. Okay, and then as you can see, I have my component. I don't have the root on. You have with Copilot you can create a component in 3 minutes, as you can see, because it provides you a kind of suggestions. But we want to start from scratch. And then I would like to create a new component without a title. I don't like to have h3 as title, but we can use Bootstrap for our let's say proposal of this this demo, and I copied all this code from my snippet code to be, let's say, more faster, and then from here I can also and it's just, let's say, a card component from let's say card component from Bootstrap, let's say nothing special, okay? And then I have to add all parameters, let's say, that I have in my component. This is a kind of suggestions. If you want to create component to share in a lot of projects, let's say it's better if you create as much as possible, say, parameters in the component, because it's more flexible, okay? At the beginning, it's a little bit annoying, but after a while, it's really, really useful. Okay, public string. We have a job title, for instance, if I remember, a job title, get and set. It's just, let's say, properties like in a normal. And I have department. Okay, and parameter. Image, I have the image. Okay, I really like to have these suggestions because I don't waste time to write every name. I have the name, good. I don't know if in this case is JetBrains Rider or a Copilot, but it doesn't matter. I'd like to have this kind of such an email. I think that's all. Okay, and now we have our component, but we don't have any, let's say, any data behind it. Okay, so we can create a new folder here, new add folder directory, call it services, and we can create a services. I think Laila showed to you something similar, but we can create a new item, a new class in this case, call it employee service. Okay, then we have our class here, and then from here we can use a new component from NuGet, call it Bogus. I don't know if you know Bogus, but Bogus is a NuGet library for creating mock data and sample data for your project. Okay, and then, but before, sorry, I forgot to create a model behind our component, and we can create models folder, the class, call it employee model, or I don't know, and then we can create. Sorry, I don't want to create everything from scratch again, and I pass my code from my snippet as well, and then we are more or less ready to create our services. And in our services, we can do more or less the same because we can create our public async thing task. So employee model is an array or a list. I don't know, whatever. I'm not good with this kind of C# syntax. And then we can create this kind of code. I don't know. I don't want to use a suggestion. And then we can use Bogus. For using Bogus, we have to add the dependencies from NuGet. Call it Bogus NuGet plus install Bogus. Yes, install on our application. And then we have Bogus, or at least we hope to have Bogus in our project. And then I start to, of course, again, to create a new code from my snippet. And then I return my employees. In this case, with Bogus, we create, give me a moment, I put a little bit down. In this case, we create with Bogus, we create a lot of sorry. Let's see if I can zoom a little bit better. Okay, we create 99 employee model, and we use this fake data, but this data seems like real data. Okay, this is why I love Bogus during my development and my mocking services in my experience. And then we have to start to use our services here in the program file, not the weather services, but the weather forecast service, but builder services, and then we can add a singleton. In this case, I don't like to use singleton, but in this case it's okay, as employee services. And then we are almost ready to see the results. Okay, so we have our component. I think we have more or less everything to start developing our employee card. And then from the index, for instance, we can go to the index page. Then we can remove everything, or at least, yeah, everything. And then we can start to create, a new, let's say, we can inject, first of all, our services, employee services. Okay, so we have our services here injected. Can solve employees, what is? Well, employee service, employees, no, sorry, employee. Oh, come on. Okay, copy and paste next time, it should be better. Employee. Okay, good. Give me a moment, because I don't know how to write employee anymore. Some troubles here. Okay, import everything. Thank you very much, Ryder, for suggesting me. And then we can start to write the code to display our, let's say, our employee's card. Okay, and then in this case, of course, if employee is null, show the loading. And then for each component, we have to, let's say, display our employee card. And I pass all the parameters in with this form. And then in my code, here below, in the code behind, okay, I also need this kind of import, employee model. And then from here, employee service is not going to wait, employee service, get employee async, get employee, right? Get employees, I don't remember, okay, get employees. And then in on initialize async, I tell to the page, hey, load my employees in this kind of models in the page. Then let's see if it works or not. I'm not sure, I hope. Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Come on. Maybe it works, I don't know. Let's see. Why does it work? Do. I forgot something, maybe? No, I don't know. Index, wait, employees. Index. No, it's good. Let's start again. I have another project ready to, maybe we have an error here in the console. No, good. For him, everything works, but it's not true. Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't work, but I can open my old project. I make some error because it's not easy to explain when you employee service here, employee service here as well. Get employees. I think it should be correct, but no, it doesn't matter because I can open my other project. Oh, come on. Yeah, live is always like this, you know. Employee directory. Okay, we can use for this moment Visual Studio for a while, and let's see if it works with this kind of project. I don't know why it didn't start. Try the debugger. Oh, yes, you're right. But the blank page is really, really strange. Okay, now this project works. I don't know why, but maybe I forgot something. So we have our card in our project, and we are really, really happy about it because we have let's say, an employee card in maybe 2 minutes, and we can use this component in other project. Okay, but let's add a little bit another, let's say, I want to call it complication in our project, because now this component live in our project, okay? But we want to share this project to the rest of the world. I mean, okay. And then we can do that because we can use a special library in the project, and then in the solution we can add another project called add new project, a Razor class library, and from here we can add a lot of components in this class library. For instance, we can take our component, okay, from here, for instance, from component employee card. We can cut the component and we can put the component here. And we have also our employee card in another project. So this component live in another project, but you can use this component in the whole project. How? You can add a reference to another project, to the other project, call it, in this case, Blazor class library 1. Of course, you can change the name of the other one. And then if you go in the index, of course, you don't have any error because we have our components in our class library. Okay, this is very useful, and this is the first step to share your component in several projects. Okay, the most important thing, or at least say one of the most important thing, you don't have to share also the model or stuff like that, because in this parameter we didn't specify, say, the model, but just say basic parameter like string, date and time, or stuff like that. This is very important because if you, let's say, port also the, say, the models into the, let's say, the component, you have always a problem for, let's say, this kind of, let's say, dependencies for models. Okay, so it's better if you are agnostic about the model and just use some string, date and time, or int value, guide value, stuff like that. Okay, and then we can also add another stuff here in our, let's say, project, because we can also add, for instance, a new CSS. You have two ways to add the CSS to your component. One is to add a new file, add new file, call it like our employee card.razor.css. And then here inside our, let's say, our component, you see our CSS. And then from here you can add, I don't remember the name of the card body, for instance. You can add your own CSS, like color, background, color, green, I don't know, something like that. And then this CSS is just related to your component. So in this case, we have created a component with his own CSS. Okay, this is very important also for porting to a project to another. And when you deploy, when you create a package starting from a Reusable class library, and you want to import this class library to several projects, everything that is in our this folder root, and also everything related to the component is inside the package. Okay, this is another very important stuff to know. Okay, and yeah, this is more or less what we have. And here we have also to import this new using how to call it, Blazor, Blazor class library. Okay, and you are done. Now you are ready to use our component in our project. Let's see if I can switch to this demo to show you. And all the code that you saw today, it's on my GitHub, just on my GitHub. And I created the steps to create also this kind of journey to Blazor component. But at the end of the session, I will share with you my GitHub account. And then from here, as you can see, I changed the background with an image. And the image is not, of course, in the, let's say, in the main project, but is in the component project. Here in this folder, we have the background. And here in my CSS, I define the background URL is background PNG. Okay, this is another stuff to know. It's very important to know, and very easy to understand. Okay, now we have a project, a separate project for our components. And I forgot to tell you, but you can also create more than one components here in our library. You can also import the counter here in another project and use the counter in another project. Or I have a project in my, let's say, at work with at least, I think, more or less 25 or 26 components. One is a grid with a lot of sub-components. Another one is very similar to employee card, and I have several components in my project. But in this case, you have to, let's say, copy and paste our project, the component project to, let's say, folder to folder in several folders in the project, and it's not really, let's say, good. And you have to two ways to, let's say, solve this problem. One is let's say, publish this project on NuGet, and the other one is very similar. You can use GitHub. You can use GitHub registry. Let's see if I can share with you just page Google GitHub registry NuGet. Okay, and the GitHub registry is a NuGet server up and running depending on your project. Okay, and then from here you can add your NuGet sources in your project. It's not, let's say, too difficult to add this kind of let's say NuGet server, okay, because you have to do 2 or 3 steps, okay, to add your class library to your NuGet. One of these steps is to go to your employee XM class library in the properties, and here from the package, no, sorry, before you have to publish to, where is the, I don't like this zoom because I don't see anything here. Advanced package. Okay, you have to check this checkbox because by default is unchecked, and it means you can create a package when you build this project. Okay, this is the first step to do. And the other one is under the package here, you can define the authors if you want to define an authors, also the project name, but the most important thing is define, say, the project URL. In this case, it's a .NET base and something like that. Where is? Oh, come on. Okay. And remember to also add this .git at the end. This is very important to remember because it's one of the errors that I do every day. Okay, remember to add, say, the Git name. Okay, and then after this step, you have to go to let's say to GitHub and create a token with a special permission, personal access token, let's say token classic, generate a new token classic. Okay, in this case, it's not important. Okay, you can create a new token. Oh, come on. Sorry, I have to log it in on my out authenticator. Okay, and then you have to add this read package, write and read package permission. And then you can save your token on Notepad or Notepad, whatever you want. And then you can launch a command from the terminal. I open my terminal here. With your access token, you have to go to your project folder. And then from here, this token is not valid. So it's just an example. So I can remove this token, but it's not valid. And you can add your source, the username, the password, and you have to define your NuGet server, with your username. Okay, this is more or less how it works. Of course, we have to let's say to build the application before, and then after this command, you can push your NuGet package. Give me a moment. Let's say to the NuGet folder, to the NuGet server. Okay, with this another command, and then in your project from your GitHub, when you push everything to GitHub, you see your project here. .NET is okay. When you push everything, you have this package here deployed on your NuGet. Okay, uploaded on your say NuGet, and it's more or less, let's say, what you need to do to have your private NuGet package in your project. Okay, this is more or less how I develop, let's say, components with Blazor. And here you can find all the reference and all the links that I use today. I suggest to you to use the second one, is the it's a wizard about create components. And I love also to share one of my achievements in the last month. Me, Andrea, and Marco wrote a book about minimal API. Laila talked about a lot about minimal API. And then from my side, it's everything. And you can find also here my link. So I'm waiting for you for a Q&A session with Khalid, I think. I don't know. Or I'm alone? No?
Yep, I'm back. So yeah, congratulations. Layla's saying congratulations on the book. Yeah, it's pretty awesome to write a book. So thank you for that. That was a really cool talk on Blazor components. You know, it's interesting to me. The first question I always have, because who added her? Rachel? Rachel's camera.
Yeah, I forgot to add my cam here.
Oh, device is not connected. Oh man, Rachel's having. Oh, there she is.
I forgot how to internet for a minute. Okay. We're back.
Sorry, I saw your camera was off, so I didn't want to add you if you were like off somewhere doing something. So
I stupidly sat there going, "Why is nobody adding me?"
I'm sorry. But Emanuele, like one of the first questions I always have when I'm thinking about components in Blazor, and you probably have professional experience doing this, how big or how small should you make your components for reusability?
Yes, it's not, let's say, an easy question to answer, honestly, because there is no, let's say, a written rules about it. For instance, this employee card, I think it's more or less the smallest component that I wrote in my work life, honestly. But you can also, for instance, let's say, create a component just for a text box, for a special validation, okay, or just for a text box. It's really, let's say, I think it's a good example. You can create a text box with a specific validation. I don't know, with a special code from a customer, or you can create also an entire grid. I mean, a really big grid as a component with some component maybe, but you can also create a big component for a grid, for instance. So there is not written rule, but yeah.
So would you say then maybe when you can stick to your single responsibility principle, but sometimes things like a grid may have one or two little extra features?
Yeah, of course, it depends how many deep do you want to go with your components, of course. Yeah, because it's also more easy if you create small components. Of course, it's more easy to port all the components in several projects, of course. But for instance, I have a special, special project template for my product at work, and I use more or less the same grid in all my project. And this is why I created this big component with grid. But for instance, I have another component for let's say, the heading of the page, for instance, H1, H2, H3 with the special classes, and I created also a component for that. But yeah, it depends of what kind of project do you have during the day, or for the customers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a good follow-up question too around components is, do you feel more comfortable when using Blazor using your own kind of custom-built components, or do you prefer components that other people build? Because you mentioned NuGet. There's community component libraries. There's also paid ones from like Syncfusion and Telerik. Like what are
Blazor? Blazor is from community. It's a mix for community and from a company. There are a lot of free components, of course, on NuGet and also on GitHub, of course. And honestly, at work, I use the let's say the component from Telerik. They are good, or at least for my project, they are really good and not so much expensive. But honestly, I prefer to have a company behind my components and not for my, let's say, work. Because if I have an issue or if I have a bug, I can contact directly Telerik instead of waiting someone in the evening that solve my issues on GitHub. But it's more about my fear and not, it's not a fixed rule as well. But yes, I use Telerik. But yeah, you mentioned also Syncfusion as a lot of good components. But I don't just Syncfusion and Telerik, but I choose Telerik because as a Microsoft MVP, I have a free license at the beginning. They start to release, say, component after, I think, 3 weeks of Blazor, Blazor life, and I start to use Telerik. But yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. I really recommend people try different components, see kind of what style they like. You know, a interesting follow-up question for components. You know, when you're building them, it's very attribute-based. Is there something you wish was in Blazor components that you feel is still kind of missing? Like, what are some things that you'd like to see?
Yeah, good question. I don't know how to how to answer.
Yeah, I guess to me, I'm thinking about, you know, when I think about Razor and I think about ASP.NET Core, I think about like tag helpers, right? The ability to write these things that can enrich HTML components. And I'm curious if that kind of tag helpers approach will also come to Blazor components, right? Like that would be kind of neat to see that happen.
Yeah, of course. But of course, Blazor is a young framework to use. And if you see Blazor maybe 2 years ago, if you try to imagine Blazor 2 years ago, it's totally different. At the beginning, for instance, 3 years ago, more or less, they didn't have also the authentication part on Blazor. And now you can use authentication from, I don't know, Azure AD or Keycloak or user identity. And especially in .NET 7, there are a lot of improvement also in Blazor because Microsoft, let's say, push a lot of resources to Blazor and minimal APIs, especially .NET 7, also .NET 6, but especially .NET 7. And I think in .NET 8, they will add more, let's say, more features to Blazor. I think. So let's see what's happening in the future. But honestly, I started to use Blazor from the beginning, and when it was in beta, and I think a customer of mine have also a production, an application in production environment with Blazor beta, if I remember, with the old framework. But yeah, I don't know. So I really like to use Blazor, honestly, during my day. What could advantages? Ooh.
Yeah. Maybe, you know, you said at the beginning, you mentioned Alexa. I think we should, every speaker should mention Alexa and ask people to buy JetBrains licenses. That's how we make our money now. We'll just mention Alexa, buy JetBrains licenses. But
I like that. So there are a few more questions. Now, you know this one was coming. What about JavaScript really? How much can you really avoid JavaScript when you're in a really complex component? And then also, Ivan's asking, is there a potential in the near future to replace and get rid of it as far as in the Blazor world and, you know, give the old stick you to the JavaScript frameworks for the front end?
Yeah, of course. This is a common question. I mean, let's say Blazor is a replacement of JavaScript. The answer is no. The short answer is no, because if you want to work with Canvas or with the maps, stuff like that, you have to write some interop with JavaScript and some code in JavaScript as well. So the short answer is no. You have to know also say JavaScript. But what I like to let's say to use in Blazor is, for instance, this kind of modeling that I used before in my my demo. So I created the employee model, and I can use the employee model in my backend if I have a backend, with API, and the same model in the front end. Okay, this is what I don't like to have in my project when I use React, also with TypeScript or I don't know, because you have a model in the backend, but you have to write a new model in the front end with TypeScript, with let's say vanilla JavaScript, I don't know, but you have to duplicate this kind of model, and I don't like this approach. Especially also the business logic is the same. You can create an external library when you have all the logic, and you can share the logic from the front end and from the back end. This is the great advantages of Blazor, and not because you don't have to know JavaScript, because JavaScript is in our life, and I think for the next 20 years will be in our life as well. So,
oh no,
yes,
I'm just joking. I love JavaScript. It's fun stuff. I guess a follow-up question to that, though, since we're talking about things that you're going to have to get used to, and you said you were with Blazor from the beginning, if there's something you could go back and tell young, naive Emanuele, like, hey, you need to know this, and this is going to save you a lot of pain and suffering, like what is that great tip you can give yourself?
Yeah. Let's say the struggling part of Blazor is always the debugging part, because of two reasons. Why the auto reload sometimes works and sometimes not. Mm-hmm. Not because of it's a problem about .NET, not the ID. And so this is the first pain, and maybe I would like to wait until maybe 1 year ago or 6 months ago instead of starting with Blazor at the beginning, because I waste a lot of time on the debugging part. Especially in the past, maybe someone remember this kind of approach. You have to launch Chrome with a special command to have the debugger in the browser and not in Visual Studio or JetBrains or Visual Studio Code. And it's not easy every time to switch from debugger from Java for Chrome and Visual Studio. And, and the other stuff is creating, honestly, components from the beginning of the project. Because if you start with components at the beginning of the project, it's more easy to scale the project and also to reuse the components, and also, of course, boost your productivity during the project. At the beginning, I create only components just in my project and not in a shared project. And every time I have to say, copy and paste or rewrite all the components from scratch, and I waste a lot of time.
Yeah, that's really good tip. Rachel, any more questions?
Oh, let's see. Well, we got a bunch of course, the yay, no more JavaScript, but also, some folks are like, boo, now I like JavaScript. So what about in relation to some of the JavaScript front-end frameworks? How would you say it compares to, say, React, Vue, any of the popular ones, and what some of those pros and cons might be?
I think Blazor is let's say, the most JavaScript framework similar to Blazor is React. I think it's not Angular. I think, especially if you use the WASM version is very similar to React and not Angular or stuff like that, because it's just let's say you can use Blazor as your front-end technology. Okay, and React is very similar, especially when you create components. Is very similar. The approach is very similar to React. Yes, also from Angular, but Angular is too complicated in this moment, I think. Especially if you don't know JavaScript or TypeScript, I think React is more easy. And again, Blazor is more similar to React instead of Vue.js or Angular.
Yeah, we're gonna put you on the spot and make you answer this spicy question because somebody asked it, or they kind of alluded to it. So you can answer with a no comment and pretend you didn't hear me ask the question. But let's see how brave you are. Their comment basically says, I don't trust that Blazor will be around 5 years from now. Do you trust that Blazor will be around 5 years from now? And do you have faith that, you've made the right decision by investing into Blazor?
And this session is it recorded, Khalid?
we'll cut this part out if you're like, no comments.
And honestly, I'm really, really brave. And I think in 5 years, we will have Blazor. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, of course, Microsoft invested a lot of time in Blazor. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say, okay, but Microsoft invested a lot of time also in Silverlight. Okay. But or other stuff, I don't know. But honestly, Microsoft invested a lot of time on Blazor and minimal APIs in the last maybe 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And especially at the beginning, for the first 2 years, Blazor was an experimental project from Microsoft. But after 2 years or 1 year and a half, I don't remember. So since 2 years, it's a real project for Microsoft. And they also deliver a lot of ebook or post. Also, Jeff Fritz deliver a lot of session about how to migrate web form to Blazor or stuff like that. And there are a lot of web form outside in the world project. And then Blazor is the, let's say, the easiest way to to migrate this kind of project. And I think Microsoft, let's say, want to invest more time and more resources on Blazor. This is why I think we'll survive for at least 5 years. But yeah, if you can cut this last maybe 1 minute, Khalid.
Well, I agree with you because Blazor, everyone kind of compares it to Silverlight, and I think that's kind of an unfair comparison.
It really is.
Yeah, because Blazor made a lot of smart decisions, right? Adopting JavaScript interop, which is like a really good decision. So you always have like an escape hatch to a different ecosystem with Blazor, whereas like Silverlight kind of tried to boil the ocean. It said, look, you're gonna be in this garden. It's a beautiful garden, but you can't get out of it. Whereas Blazor made a lot of smart decisions.
Well, also, because Microsoft did one thing in the past does not mean that this product will be exactly the same. Companies don't do exactly the same thing every time. Many of the people who were released Silverlight are not on this team anymore. They've moved on. So you have fresh people in there. Sure, some mistakes get repeated, but generally, no. And it is ASP.NET. That is their largest developer product, right? It's ASP.NET. So it is on that stack. So it's not going to go away that easily. Silverlight was not. It wasn't its own thing, right? So you were kind of siloed off there. So.
Yeah, and I will say Layla kind of alluded to it, like the multiple hosting models. You don't have to go all in with Blazor. You can kind of pick and choose when you want to use it. And I personally, this is my opinion, I think WebAssembly definitely is the future. I just saw yesterday Docker has WebAssembly support now for containerizing .NET. So even if Blazor kind of starts to fade a little bit, WebAssembly and .NET are going to be going really strong in 5 years. But I don't really see Blazor going away anytime soon. So,
Blazor used to be Razor Pages, which used to be MVC, basically. Right? It's not new stuff. It's all built on this core that has been invested in what, almost 2 decades, and a lot of people and a lot of time and a lot of maturity there. So that is not good. So you might see something else past Blazor, but it's going to be something else on the same stack. It's not going to be a whole new rewrite. That would be financially irresponsible.
I totally agree. And in addition, you can use also your skills for Razor that you have from the past, from MVC or Razor Pages. And honestly, I'm not a big fan about Razor Pages, but they exist, I think, since more or less 4 5 years, maybe.
That's
Right now.
about
5 years. And let's say no one talk about it, but they exist. And Microsoft, let's say, didn't, let's say, abandon this kind of project, but it exists. And I think at least Blazor will do the same. I think.
I mean, I'm personally a big fan of Razor Pages because of like if you just need to build form driven pages, but
in 3 hours you have an application up and running with Razor Pages. Instead of your productivity is more, let's say, let's say compared with the ASP.NET MVC, of course, the productivity is higher. But yes, maybe because I come from ASP.NET MVC, I don't like Razor Pages, but it's my own opinion. It's not.
We do have some doubters in the chat, so let's come back here in 5 years, and then we'll try to figure out what actually did happen.
Of course.
No one can see the future, but one last question: where do you get a xenomorph head from? Because I'm really curious. Did you go into space and get it? Is what I'm asking.
Is that 25th anniversary?
Oh my!
Special edition, and there are a lot of DVDs here inside of the head. With the old first 4 movies.
Oh man! Okay, don't let me in your house ever. Nice. Is what I'm trying to say.
Totally don't.
It'll disappear. But on that note, I don't think there's any more questions. Thank you so much for this talk. It was a lot of fun. The chat was fun, and a lot of these opinions are really good to have, and these discussions are really good to have. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me back. And see you around.
Have a good one. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.